Why are we here? It's the fundamental question, isn't it? It's the secret to life, some people would say. The secret to happiness is to find that answer. Why am I here? What did God make me for? What's my purpose in life? What is the meaning to my life? It's a fitting way to start a new season of Lent. It's a fitting way to start a new chapter in ministry. And I have to feel that that's how Jesus started in his ministry, with that question, why am I here? It's the first thing Jesus did, was to find that answer. After he was baptized, after he was commissioned, before he starts to do anything, before he heals the sick, before he performs any miracles at all, the first thing he does is retreat, to go off into the wilderness, to find that question, why am I here? What does God want with me? What does God want me to do? And in those 40 days of fasting, of meditation, of prayer, Jesus finds his answer. As the devil comes to him and tempts him, as the devil often does, as the devil is tempted from the beginning of time, he comes to Jesus and offers him power, offers him control, offers him ability to do wondrous things. And it's in that Jesus realizes what God really intends for him. It's in that moment that Jesus realizes that God didn't make him to perform parlor tricks for his own benefit, for his own glory. That he wasn't brought here for his own power, for his own might, for his own accolades. He realizes that he's there. His purpose, the why for Jesus, is to serve God and to follow only him. And it's with that clarity, it's with that understanding, that from that moment Jesus is shot out into the world as if from a cannon. And he goes about his work of serving God. He heals the sick. He cares for the needy. He preaches love and justice and forgiveness to the hopeless, to the helpless, to the lonely. He brings God's love into the world. And he changes the world forever. Why am I here? Why are we here? It's a question we ask ourselves as we start our ministry, new phases in our ministry together. There's great need in the world. There are great possibilities for us. And while we may want to jump into our ministry, jump into the work at hand, we're actually called to retreat, if only for a little while. Now, you know that often in my sermons, I tell you we have to look outside of ourselves. We have to go out into the world and reach out and bring what we do here out there. But for this time only, for Lent only, I'm going to urge us to look within ourselves, to turn into ourselves, look into our own hearts, look into our own selves. If just for these 40 days of Lent, that we look within ourselves to ask that question, why are we here? We're going to do that in a few different ways during this season. I talked to you before about how we're going to learn about ourselves, but I have a model that we've come across through a guy named Will Mancini, who wrote a book called Church Unique. Talks about how we discover who we are before we can figure out where we're going. The first question is, who are we? Before we know what we're doing, before we know why we're here, you have to know who we are. And the vision team that I introduced you to earlier in the service, they're going to be tasked with finding out the answer to that question. Who are you individually? What are your values? What's important to you? What are you passionate about? And more than that, who are we as a community? What Ascension all about? What is it that makes us us? What's the one thing that if we took it away from our community, it wouldn't be us anymore? We're going to ask those questions informally in group settings. We're going to ask all of our congregation, both in surveys that we'll have in worship, in things that are sent home for you to ponder, to pray over, and to answer back to. We'll find out who we are. And after we know who we are, we have to figure out what are our gifts. What has God given us? Whether you realize it or not, every single person in this room is gifted by God. Every single person here has unique talents that God has given you. You may not even realize it yet. They may be dormant right now. But God has created you to perform a miraculous ministry in this world. And we're going to figure out what that is. This season, during Lent, we have a Bible study called Life Keys. Discover who you are. And we'll focus on how God has gifted us. It'll be personality profiles, life gifts, exercises, a way to examine what your passions are, the things that come natural to you when you're not even thinking about it. That's how we figure out how God has gifted us, what gifts we have. At the same time, forming a group to figure out where is the need in our community. I need a small group of people to work with me to meet with local officials, people who know this community, principals, law enforcement, elected officials, people who know the ins and outs of Deer Park and surrounding community, so that we can find out where there is need in our area. Who's not being served right now? What needs aren't being met? What can we do to reach out? And when we have those answers, when we find out who we are, when we find out what our gifts are, and we find out where is that need, then we see where we intersect, we see where we overlap. And it's in that spot that we see God's call. That is why we're here. That is what God made us for. That is how God calls us to respond. And that's our next step. Once we hear what God's call is for us, once we have that challenge before us, then it's time for us to be shot out into the world, to respond just as Jesus responded, by reaching out and finding out how we can answer God's call. That's how we map our ministry into the future. But first we spend these 40 days looking inward, examining ourselves, finding out who we are, what we're gifted with, where our need is. And it's in there that we can answer how we respond. Because the when and the where is now. The time is now for us to reach out, and for us to grow in our ministry. Because that's why we're here. Amen.